into episode 1 of Red Raider Recon. I'm Clint Scott. He's Rob Bro.
Today, we're going to look ahead to 2025, set some expectations, and look at who has joined the Red Raider team. But first, a look at 2024.
2024 provided several highs and lows as the Red Raiders ended up 8-5. Tech beat both participants of the Big 12 championship game, beating Arizona State at home and Iowa State on the road, but also had frustrating losses to TCU, Baylor, and Colorado. In the end, it was a 6-3 mark in Big 12 play, making it the third straight season Tech had a winning conference record. Despite a loss to Arkansas, it also marked the fourth straight bowl game appearance. The offseason has had plenty of its own noteworthy stories. After defensive coordinator Tim DeRuyter was let go, he was replaced by Sheil Wood. The offense saw a change as well. Offensive coordinator Zach Kittley was hired by FAU for his first head coaching gig. In came Mac Leftwich from Texas State. Texas Tech also said goodbye to several big pieces on last season's roster. Record-setting running back Taj Brooks, tight end Jalen Conyers, offensive tackle Caleb Rogers, and wide receiver Josh Kelly all graduated from the offensive side of the ball. Defensively, Tech also bid adieu to defensive backs Braylon Lux and CJ Baskerville. All were either drafted or signed as undrafted free agents. Out with the old, in with the new. The biggest offseason story was Tech signing one of the highest-rated portal classes in the country. 22 players signed with Tech out of the transfer portal, 10 for the offense, 10 for the defense, and 2 on special teams. The class features highly sought-after names like David Bailey and Howard Sampson, to a familiar face in Micah Hudson. They'll join a group led by key returners on both sides of the ball. Quarterback Baron Morton started all 12 regular season games for the Red Raiders, something that hadn't happened since Patrick Mahomes did it in 2016. He'll have Caleb Douglas and Coy Aiken as returning receivers. Defensively, Jacob Rodriguez led the Big 12 in tackles, earning an all-conference first-team nod. He returns alongside 2023's Big 12 Defensive Freshman of the Year, Ben Roberts. They'll also be joined by other familiar faces like A.J. McCarty, Brendan Jordan, and Chapman Lewis. 2025 will again feature 7 home games on the schedule. All 3 non-conference opponents will be at the Jones, and 4 in the Big 12. The season kicks off August 30th against Arkansas Pine Bluff.
That's right, Clint. Arkansas Pine Bluff is the first game on the season. If you notice that crispy voice there in the voiceover, great work. Crispy? I don't know if you're crispy.
I wouldn't say crispy, cringy.
I've heard it both ways.
Slightly nasally. High-pitched.
Yeah, well, strong.
Strong.
Strong voice.
Dominant.
You know what else is strong? Hopefully Baron Morton's shoulder. He missed the spring, missed the bowl game, but kind of a, I don't know what the surgery was exactly. Can we say reconstructed? Bionic? Rebuilt?
I like bionic.
All right, so the bionic shoulder now from Baron Morton misses spring ball, and of course, physically, I think that's important. But also, he's not been able to rep this new offense. How does that affect how the offense starts in 2025? And then physically, what looks different for Baron Morton next year?
Yeah, I think there's going to be some really positive things to look forward to, and then there's going to be some questions like that with Baron Morton. Like one, last year starts all 12 games, as the crispy voiceover mentioned, and you get the most productive season you've had in some time at the quarterback spot, right? And you do that with Baron Morton, who wasn't even 100% all last year. Now, it's hard to tell, okay, what was he like, 95%? Just how close was he to that clip? But either way, I really believe when they're saying, hey, this is going to be the healthiest version of Baron Morton we've seen since he was a freshman before we saw him get injured the first time, way back when, which that feels like a decade ago. Timing is a big thing, and you're going to have some new weapons, and as you mentioned, a new offense and all of that, but I think you still have enough time. And I also think Baron Morton now is an experienced quarterback, and the expectation would be, hey, you should be able to pick up a lot of these things quickly. And hopefully having, a safety blanket like Coy Aiken, to have that comfort, to have the connection with Caleb Douglas already established, I think will help him in that regard. And then you're looking around at guys like Reggie Virgil and Alexander and like, hey, Micah Hudson again. He was throwing passes to him in theory last year. But you have obviously a couple of new guys that you are trying to establish that chemistry with. But I think as an older player and now a guy that's seen a thing or two, I don't think that'll be a problem. And also it helps I mean, it's not like he came to us for surgery, like came to and somehow had that connection where had it worked on with one of the best surgical hands in the world.
Yeah. And this is a guy who's worked on high-level athletes all across sports. And you think of a big shoulder injury, he's the one that worked on it. It seems like in athletics. So we've heard a lot about, Mac Leftwich, his new offense. You're going to go deep. You're going to have the deep ball. You're going to go down the field. It's just, can Baron Morton be aggressive with the new shoulder more so than he had been? Now, in the spring, Joey McGuire said that Baron Morton had been improving throughout the year. And you saw him kind of chunking it deep in the last couple of games, down the field to Douglas, down the field to some of these other guys. So, I mean, if that's the Baron Morton we get, if the Baron Morton from Stillwater is what you're getting this season, and I'm talking about Stillwater the final time when he throws for a career high or at least close to a career high, if you can get 5, 6 300-yard games from Baron Morton this year, I mean, your whole team's unlocked.
I think if you get, one, top to bottom, this should be, and here's the should be to start, a much improved roster overall. Should have a much better defense to lean on for the offense. Should be able to play complementary football like we hear about all the time. And then offensively, I know you're losing a huge piece with Taj Brooks, but I think you have pieces to put something together where you can get at least close to that number. Then hopefully the passing game it's going to be hard. I mean, you threw for plenty of yards last year, but can you do it in a timely fashion? Can you do it when it matters most? And can you do it consistently?
Yeah.
But the let it rip version of Baron Morton that you saw the last 2 weeks, I think that's the Baron Morton you're going to need this year to take it to the next level. Because I think your floor is a good team, but your ceiling is a great team.
And you still have to protect the ball.
Yeah.
But, yeah, we need to...
You need an aggressive,
zip, baby.
You need an aggressive Baron Morton.
You do.
And especially if it is lined up with what Mac Leftwich's offense is, if you have a hesitant Baron Morton, I think that's where you're going to get into more turnovers.
Yes.
Where if you're questioning what you're seeing on the field, if you are taking too long in your progressions, if you're going 1, 2, 3 and don't like 1, you wait too long to get 2, and you wait even longer to get 3, and then you're overthinking and you're not just playing football and let what comes naturally to you.
Yeah.
That's where you're in more trouble. And by the way, that's also not going to help out your offensive line, which, again, that unit should be improved.
Should be.
Defensively, you also had another new coordinator. Not 2 new defensive coordinators, but another new coordinator to the roster. Yeah, Sheil Wood from Houston.
From Houston.
Did you think you would be saying that this decade?
Houston,
and be excited about it.
Not since they joined the Big 12, no. Because they were cooking pretty good this decade. But certainly not in the last 3 or 4 years, no. No, I would not have been excited about that. But the defense, they were not good last year. But they were losing games like 20-10.
Yeah. And they weren't,
17-3.
What was impressive to me is they were doing that, without just causing getting all of these sack numbers or anything like that. It's not like they weren't causing pressure.
Yeah.
But Sheil Wood did such a good job in that unit, improving it from the year before. But just start with having guys in the right spot, which is something you were severely lacking in very important games. And just making it hard to get around their unit and find positive yards. And so I think you are I think you're way more talented than what that Houston defense was last year. So if he can make that same connection with this roster, this is where I think you could be one of the best, if not the best defense in the league.
Houston gave up about half as many quote-unquote big plays as Texas Tech did last year. So
shooks you up thinking about it. So some of the new pieces he has to work with, I would say of all of the transfers that you have in the class, I think my top 2 are on the defensive side. And it's hard not to start with David Bailey, but I'm also really excited about Lee Hunter. And you've got some other names in there, like Romello Height, obviously, and then Anthony Holmes. That defensive front, I think, could make the biggest jump from last year to this year. The secondary too would probably be in that conversation, but I just think if you combine defensive line and outside linebackers, that unit could make a massive step forward from what you had last year.
If two things on what you just said. If you gave me your top 5 transfers in this class to Texas Tech right now, and 4 of them were defensive linemen, I would say that's a pretty good list. And I wouldn't argue much. That wouldn't be my top 5.
Well, I'd say two of those are my top 5.
But I'm saying I wouldn't argue. If it was you or anyone else saying that, and you were like, oh, yeah, 4 of my top 5 are Lee Hunter, David Bailey, Romello Height, and Skylar Gill Howard.
Oh, yeah.
And Anthony Holmes is 7. I'd be like, yeah, probably.
Sure. Sounds fun.
And again, if the secondary is improved this year, Clint, it's because the defensive line is so much better. And I think you had some pretty good defensive linemen last year at times. But you could argue that your top 2 were injured preseason and missed a bunch of time. And then those 2 guys aren't even here anymore because they were out-recruited or outgrown. And so I think I'm really impressed. And if you just said, out of all the transfer portal position groups, offense, defense, who was improved the most, defensive line would be 1A, and I think corner would be 1B. Because you really added some extreme depth to the corner position. I think you added a true number 1 in Polak.
Offensive line, you've also added there with, if you go back to the other side of the ball. What's funny to me about the offensive line is last year, right? If you have a running back set a record. You have back-to-back 1,500 yards from Taj Brooks.
Never been done.
That does not happen if the offensive line is as bad as it is described. Now, was it consistently good? No, there were games where in pass protection that, like against Colorado, where you just hand-delivered a defender to Baron Morton.
Very bad.
There were times in the running game where Taj Brooks was forced to show, hey, I can break a bunch of tackles because I have to.
Yep.
But it wasn't always the case. I think the issue with the offensive line is, one, we never got to see Vinny Scurry, who was supposed to be one of your best, if not your best piece on that front. But when you have a group like that was supposed to take a giant step forward, and that's what we've heard. That's something under the McGuire era that we keep on hearing is how much better the offensive line will be, and they don't ever really even get close to reaching those expectations. Yeah. This year, I think you have the chance to.
You know I'm an offensive line guy. Mm-hmm. You know I try to defend it. I've tried to defend it the last few years. Caleb Rogers was obviously better than everyone thought he was. Mm-hmm. Going in the third round of the NFL draft. I am reserving my judgment on the offensive line until I see him play. Or at least until I know who the starting 5 is. Because Sheridan Wilson and Cash Cleveland are both competent centers in the Big 12. Does one of them slide to guard? Davian Carter is a really good pass blocker. We just couldn't move anybody in the run game last year. And then Vinny Scurry, I think, is a competent offensive lineman. You have Howard Sampson coming in from North Carolina. Big body, left tackle, above average PFF grades. Then you have Will Jados or Hunter Zambrano, who I just, one of them hasn't played in a year and is an FCS All-American. And the other one is one of the worst pass blockers in college football the last couple of years, but a really good run blocker, Jados. So that's just according to PFF. So I do think the offensive line as a unit could be improved, but I'm not ready to just sit here and say they're a Big 12 championship level offensive line.
And what unit, if it was all on one unit or one position, and you said this is the reason you did or didn't make it to Arlington, so we'll set our actual expectations here in just a second. Is it offensive line? Is it quarterback? Is it secondary? What would you think that it was that held you back? Because as exciting as this roster is, there's a lot of unproven and a lot of questions. Just because you're trying to figure out what some of this looks like.
I would certainly say it's one of the trenches. It's either the defensive line didn't live up to expectations or the offensive line lived up to some of the past expectations from Texas Tech fans. But it's one of the trenches. It's either this unit didn't gel defensively because I think you're very talented, or the offensive line just couldn't keep Baron Morton healthy enough to be healthy. Baron Bascom Morton, by the way. Did you see his graduation?
No.
Baron Bascom Morton.
Wow. Baron Bascom.
Bascom.
Baron Bascom.
Bascom with an M.
Bascom.
Bascom.
Not like Baskin Robbins.
No.
Bascom Robbins.
Bascom. Yeah.
Bascom.
Yeah.
There we go. Before we give our records here, let's go to Joey McGuire.
Okay.
Now, you are still looking.
Is he here?
Yeah.
Let's go to Joey. Let's go live to Joey McGuire as he's reporting.
Joey, are you there?
All right, we'll do it.
Hi, this is Joey. You're still looking for your first undefeated non-conference season. If it doesn't happen this year, I don't know when it's going to.
It has to.
All three are at home. Oregon State, I think, is the best opponent, but even then, the Beavers were a mess last year, and I don't think they got any better. This should not be the Washington State scare. And on top of it, it's not on the road. Obviously, it's at home. So this should be a 3-0 year for them. But you look at some of these numbers for McGuire.
Yep.
You've done things that you haven't done since the Leach era, and you've got a total record 23-16, 16-11 in Big 12 play. You've had 3 winning seasons in a row, 4-7 against ranked opponents, but you still have, more ranked wins than you felt like you've had in a decade. Non-conference record, mentioned that's 5-4. Your home record, really good, 15-5. Road record, 6-10. Looking to bump up some of those numbers, but with all of the resources that you have, not found this year, but multiplied this year, with everything that's been given to the program from a foundation standpoint, from facilities, just from money backing, and now it paying off and getting the roster. Does this feel like a make or break year for Coach McGuire?
Beyond that, it feels like a make or break year for the football program.
Mm-hmm.
If Joey somehow doesn't make a bowl game this year, I don't know, something crazy might happen. Mm-hmm. That is so far off my radar that I don't think that'll happen. But we've had this conversation, and it gets a little philosophical. Is 9-3 a disappointing season for Texas Tech this season? And it's, on one hand, it's like in the history of Texas Tech, I'm getting emotional again. In the history of Texas Tech, you don't do that very often. So it's not disappointing, right? Well, in the history of Texas Tech, how many times have you spent $25 million on a football roster? How many times in the history of Texas Tech have you had $1 million coordinator at each position? How many times in the history of Texas Tech have you brought in transfers, 20 of them in one offseason, from big-time either FCS or Division I opponents to bring in and to bolster your roster?
How many times have you upset not just a conference, but 2 conferences that have had the most clutch on a sport that we've ever seen with the SEC and the Big Ten? Where you've got unnamed horses who are livid and saying you're blanking up the system. Real quotes.
Yes.
Not just like, hey, we're hearing rumblings that they're not very happy. We go to Joey McGuire, who's telling us in Knoxville they're upset that you are turning the system on top of its head because you're able to. And by the way, this is something they've been doing for years in the SEC. Some of the higher ends in the Big Ten have been doing this for years and are the old money, the old just power programs of this sport. And this is the first year you've had someone on the outside break in and make them look disheveled. Scare them.
So to that point, we had the one hand where it's like 9-3, pretty good for Texas Tech. That's the Joe Klatt thinking. The new thinking is you're not Texas Tech of 2013. when you hired Cliff Kingsbury, and then he had two $250,000 coordinators and one recruiting personnel, and it was just the in-house recruiter that was scheduling visits. You have, I mean, your assistant pool is probably 4 times as much, 5 times as much as it has been in the past.
Mm-hmm.
And, of course, college football has grown, and you're in the NIL era, so there is obviously some new stuff here, but a lot of programs have been spending to be winners. And Texas Tech, I think, in my opinion, you probably matched what you were doing with Leach, certainly not to the extent that some of these other schools were doing. But you got behind in Texas Tech in the Big 12. And I think in the last 2 years, you've really stepped to the front.
Mm-hmm.
And if that doesn't translate to legitimate Big 12 championship aspirations this year, then A, you're spending wrong, and B, you really have to take a deep dive into the program and try to figure out what's going on.
Perfect way to transition then, because now the question is, the expectation for Arlington is there. It seems like this is your best chance in the history of the program, in the history of you being in the Big 12. Can they get there? Will they get there?
Can they? Yes. Will they? If you asked me 2 weeks ago, I was on a pretty good mountaintop.
Mm-hmm.
Clint Scott.
Yodelehi-hoo, Rob Brill.
And I was writing about the transfer portal, talking about the number 1 class of all time, talking about these returners, just in my own little Texas Tech bubble, right? Then I started looking at the Big 12 power rankings to write that story. And do you have any returners on defense Arizona State has?
The specific number, no, but I know it's a
10.
lot. Okay,
They
that is
have
a lot.
10 returners on defense and a lot on offense, too, including Sam Leavitt, who I think is the best quarterback in the Big 12, and Jordan Tyson, who's coming off an injury.
Keep going. Why? Yes, we'll get to that.
And then I think Baylor, who finished 6-1 last year with a loss in a bowl game, is really good. Now, that was a weak schedule they finished on.
Mm-hmm.
But I really, really like Sawyer Robertson and their kind of trio at wide receiver and running back. I think TCU is underrated offensively. Now, I don't know that they did enough defensively to really do what they need to do, but I think they can punch up this Big 12 season. I think BYU returns a lot. It can be good. So I think there are 4 or 5 Big 12 contenders, and half of them are on your schedule. You don't play Baylor or TCU, but you do play the other 2. And then Kansas State, who's just kind of a machine.
And it's funny that you didn't mention one of the teams that was in the Big 12 championship. Now, I get it. Iowa State just lost 2 receivers to the draft. However, Iowa State is consistently good on defense. They somehow consistently stay old. Rocco Becht, I think, is an underrated quarterback. And the running game is what they leaned on a lot last year.
Yeah.
And so...
And Hansen and Abu Salma are back.
Yeah, and so I think the Big 12 feels just as wide open as it did last year.
So if I'm gonna come in here and say that you have brand new expectations and all this, yada yada yada, would 9-3 feel lackluster? Yes, but I'd have to see who those 3 losses to and how they were handled, right? If you lose to Arizona State, Kansas State, and who else would I not be as upset with?
Well, you have like BYU.
Sure, BYU.
Even at
home, yeah. Or Utah. If you lose to Utah on the road and Arizona State on the road and then somebody at home, then it's like, okay, if Utah and Arizona State are in the Big 12 championship and you have one more loss to BYU and they were right there too, and 9-3 ties you with a couple other teams to be in the mix, it's like that's not as disappointing. That's 2008 level, but you just run into some bad teams and didn't score on the last moment, right? That's the razor's thin margin. But if you do beat Houston, you should beat Houston. If you do beat Utah on the road, if you do beat Arizona State on the road, yeah, there's no reason you shouldn't be in the Big 12 championship.
Kind of goes back to the question you had last year, right? That's part of the problem where it's been said 1,000 times, hey, remember when you beat both teams that were in the Big 12 championship and one of them was on the road, one of them that we have, even though you have a win
Yeah,
in
I'm sorry.
Ames, you're good. Even though you have a win in Ames before that,
Yeah.
recently it still felt like it's just impossible to win there. And on top of that, a year that Campbell gets back to the Big 12 championship, but you don't find a way to get there
Right.
yourself.
And people don't talk about this a lot. If 2 years prior, Joey McGuire's first year, if you beat Kansas State, you're playing TCU for a Big 12 championship.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a game that gets away from you early, and then you fight back in the second quarter, and then you're a play or two away. You go for it on fourth down in your own territory. They kick a field goal. The game gets away. Then there's a penalty late that it's like, I think that was a penalty, and there was a no call. So, yeah, if you beat Kansas State that year, you're probably in a Big 12 championship 2 of the 3 years. If you beat Colorado, if you beat Kansas State. So, yeah, you've been really close. But you need to take the next step, in my opinion.
All right, so here, late May, what is the official record prediction for Rob Bro?
Yeah, I think, in the respect that we're talking, I would go 10-2. And that's an undefeated non-con.
Mm-hmm.
And then a 7-2 Big 12 record. But I really do expect Utah to be better. I think that defense was legit last year, and it brings a lot back. And I think Arizona State is going to be good, and BYU, and I think you're playing some tough Big 12 teams. So I would go 10-2, and I think that puts you in a position to be in a Big 12 championship, but probably through some tiebreakers.
I also have it at 10-2, and to what you just noted, I think there's a very real possibility you go 10-2 and you're not in the Big 12 championship game because of tiebreakers, because I think the Big 12, to what you were just talking about, has 4 or 5 teams that are also saying, probably predicting around that same mark.
And in that respect, 10-2 and a Pop-Tarts Bowl, I think that's a step forward. There's going to be a lot of Texas Tech fans, if that happens, that are talking about we're wasting our money. It's not your money. All right? And again, it feels like I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth, but that's just how thin the margins are. Mm-hmm. It's a big gap between 9-3 and 10-2.
I really shout out to Jamie Lent. Lent, Choice Woodman, and I talked about this recently, how much different 9-3 feels in any way you get there.
It's such
9-3 with the loss in the non-conference and a 7-2 Big 12 mark would still have a very sour taste in your mouth because of how it started. 6-3 in Big 12 play and dropping probably a game at home or a game even on the road that you feel like you absolutely shouldn't have. Yeah. That's not going to feel good.
Dropping your first 3, your last 3.
Doesn't matter.
It's all different. Yeah.
So we got 2 10-2 records. What we're going to do every single week is we're going to do a fan-submitted question of the week. And so our first one here, Rob, is if you looked in one team that wasn't Tech, looked at one team that wasn't Tech in the Big 12 championship game, who would you pick? So lock in one.
All right. So when I get these kind of questions, I don't like giving the likely answer, right?
Mm-hmm. Big dark horse fan.
I like to give a dark horse. I think I'm going to give you 2. Okay. I think Baylor's the one people are talking about. I've certainly been talking about him. The chat line doesn't like it, but I'm high on Baylor this year. The other one, they've been saying it for 3 years, man, that they're going to run the Big 12. I think it's time for them to prove it. I think this defense, new offensive coordinator, I think Devin Dampier is a really a good playmaking quarterback. I'm going to go Utah to be in the Big 12 championship.
I do think that they'll be better, but
obviously Arizona State's the easy answer here.
I think their biggest question for them is how much more improved is the quarterback spot this year. That's where I start.
Yeah.
Because like you said, the defense had them in some games last year, but it was just atrocious quarterback play.
And Devin Dampier is not consistent.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think with some more talent around him, he can find some consistency.
So I am going to go with, I guess, the quote-unquote obvious one because they won it last year. However, I feel like Arizona State has a ton of doubters because one player left. Now, Cam Skattebo was incredible. and had an amazing year, and I'm not trying to make it seem like he wasn't as good as he was. But what you pointed at, they won a lot of games with the defense.
Yeah.
And I knew they had a lot returning. Didn't know what the number was. Thought it was somewhere between 8 and 9. 10's one more better. Yeah. The other thing, there you go. That's some math.
One more better. That's good.
Sorry. But the question.
Yeah.
The question of, is Sam Levitt, he's a redshirt freshman last year.
Yeah.
And he was extremely efficient.
Yeah.
And late in the season, whenever they were on the biggest stage, yes, they were leaning on Cam Scadaboo, but they didn't have arguably the best receiver in the Big 12, or at least a solid top 5 guy in Jordan Tyson, who will be back. I think the offensive line played really well last year. They have some of those pieces back. And they've got a transfer running back in there. I think a younger guy, too, from the roster last year.
Kanye Uday.
There you go. Who's
from Army. 1,000 yards.
There's the transfer. Yeah. Who's to say that they can't do a close enough job? You're trying to do that with Taj Brooks, right?
Yeah, I've got some hot takes on the Taj Brooks stuff. So we'll do in the running back episode. But I agree that I think Uday can step in and be good.
And I think if you have it's like everyone thinks Sam Levitt's going to be the exact same quarterback as last year. Again, a young guy that offense is expecting to take a step forward. And you have, again, what I think is, in my opinion, the best weapon in the Big 12 this year. As long as he stays healthy, too, although that was a weird collarbone late in the season. And Jordan Tyson has all the athleticism to me in the world and will be easily an NFL guy. So I'll take, feels like cheating, but I'll take last year's Big 12 champ.
I don't think I would argue with anybody saying any top 8 team beyond maybe Kansas State, because I don't trust Kansas State particularly, though I do think they're a bit of a machine and can prove me wrong easily. But yeah, if you were like TCU, I'd be like, okay, well, that's not mine. But
hey, 9 wins last year. I keep on forgetting.
Yeah. So they return some and got a big transfer piece at wide receiver. So we'll see.
That is going to do it for our first episode. If you are following along, we'll go week by week. We'll get into different position groups. We'll get into the coordinators eventually later in the summer. We'll get into the actual schedule, and we're going to lead you all the way up to Arkansas Pine Bluff. It's going to be a very fun summer. If you have any questions that you want to submit for the fan question of the week, you can tweet at T973. Just mention Red Raider Recon, or you can tweet Rob. You can tweet me. I am at ClinnerumHC.
Rob Bro Show.
Hit us up on Twitter. Follow us over there. And yeah, if you're watching on YouTube, like, subscribe, and heads up next week, we will start with Mac Leftwich and the offense. Thanks for hanging out.
Get out of here!
Are you still here?